Please welcome the multitudinous Matthew McConaughey.
The what?
The multitudinous.
Multitudinous. All right. I love words, and I've never used that one. I'm going to.
It occurred to me on the subway. We will get around to talking about Dallas Buyers Club because that's what everyone wants to hear about. But I saw you last night on the Actors Studios series on Bravo. And
A couple people like that.
I got very curious about how you learn to do what you do, and if there are particular people along the way that you learn things from.
Yeah. 1992, I went to the right bar, met the right guy. His name was Don Phillips. He was in town casting a film. 5 hours later, we got kicked out of So Said Bar, and he said, "Have you ever done any acting before?" And I said, "I was in a Miller Lite commercial for about that long. It didn't really count. It was like not even really a modeling job. It was just like, that was me right there. No one really even recognized me." But he said, there was a film, the script I'm in town casting for, there's a part you might be right for. Come to this address, pick up the script tomorrow morning. I did 9:30. The character had 3 lines, was in a few scenes, and I remember going back home to Longview, where I was from, and working on this character for 2 weeks. Came back and read for it and got it. The film and the role was David Wooderson in film Dazed and Confused, which was my very first film. Now, when I went and read for that, it was obvious to Rick that I was not that guy. One, when I was in a fraternity, I had my jeans pressed, I tucked in, I shaved before going for this job interview, because that's what I was brought up to do, right? But as soon as he said, "Okay, let's read," I kind of kicked back and did my version of Wooderson. And he goes, I remember going, "Wait, you're not this guy." And I went, "No, but I know who he is." And who the guy was for me at that time was who I thought my brother was when I was 10 and he was 17. So I had a very romanticized view. My brother was 7 feet tall in my eyes. His car was the fastest car. His Concorde system was the best sound system in the world. And I remember seeing him leaning against the wall in the smoking section at school, and he was cooler than James Dean to me. So it was a romanticized view of who he was. But that's when my first job and how I started to approach what I was doing, even though I don't know if I really knew what I was doing, was, okay, I may not be this guy, but if I know who this guy is, or I know someone like this, whether they're that way in real life or it's how I perceive them. I'll tell a quick funny story on the way to learning what it is that I do, and some pitfalls that I learned along the way. Dazed and Confused, I ended up working for 3 weeks. It was a lot of improvisation. The other actors, and they were lobbing me lines, and I remember having a feeling like, boy, I feel like you could put a blindfold on me and I can be this guy, Wooderson. I feel like you could blindfold me, press record, and put me in any situation, and I'll go to the 7-Eleven. I can buy. I remember going, what would they buy with $5 at the 7-Eleven, or what world that character lives in? What would they know? What they would buy, what they would wear, what they would do in any kind of situation. Well, after about the 3 weeks on that, which was as I said, a lot of improvisation, I went on back to school, came back out to Los Angeles, and got a few roles, and it was around Boys on the Side. I had played a few very conservative roles, and I had about a year and a half where I would audition, and I would get 1 callback, 2 callbacks, 3 callbacks, and I never got the part. And I remember feeling like I'm too tight. You know what I mean? I think maybe I'm studying too much. I remember talking to myself, and maybe I'm studying too much about the import of the line and everything. And you know what? I think I need to go back to doing what I did when I first started, which is I was just a guy and I improvised. So I had a film that I was cast for, and I was playing this on the border Mexican drug lord. And I told myself, I said, I'm not going to look at the sides. I'm not even going to read the script. It's an on-the-border Mexican drug lord. I hear the synopsis. If I know my man, then I'll show up and just, obviously, I'll read it right before I go on. And if I know my man, that'll be like, well, that's exactly what he'd say. Foolish. I go to set that morning. All right, all I got to do is have a glance at it, and it'll be like, yep, I know how to do it. Well, I look at it right before we're about to say action, and it was a 1.5-page monologue in Spanish. Oh, and I remember I felt this drip of sweat come up on the back of my head and go down, and I, for whatever reason, I looked over and I said, can you give me about 12 minutes? Why I said 12 minutes, I don't know. I figured it was like not long enough to be inconsiderate, but long enough to maybe get a little bit of that stuff. Anyway, I think I was horrible in it. I stammered through some Spanish and tried to look at lines. So then I was like, okay, that's not the way to go. There's a blend here of having to do your due diligence, do your studying, but then being able to go there on the day and relax and throw it all away. In about 1997, that same guy that I met, that cast me in Dazed and Confused that I met in that bar, said, hey, you know what, I think it's time for you to start working with somebody. And I was sort of fearful of it. As when you're going to go learn something, and I never really learned what acting was, I was, I'm also afraid of learning too much and being regimented. And I must say, when I first started learning, as this lady I worked with, Penny, in Los Angeles, I was a little rigid.
Penny Allen?
Yes, I was a little rigid. But then as what happens, if you study, you learn it all becomes, you don't take everything literally. You learn what works for you, what doesn't. And went from there. So I learned from her my rights as an actor. I learned from her that it is, I may start off going, how am I this guy? But I'm going to get to pretty soon, wait, how is that guy me? Because it's got to go through me when if I'm gonna portray the man. I also, one of the things that I've tried to do, and it's harder in some films than others, but it's my favorite performances, my favorite kind of films, is the impasse. Catch. So many times I've noticed in scenes, I've had many times where I tried to load the scene. I remember I had a movie, I won't say the name, but I saw it and I was like, what is it? Something's off. And I was told by a friend, well, it's like you're trying to hit a grand slam every scene. I was like, to use a baseball term, yeah, sometimes you got to bunt, sometimes you got to single, sometimes you got to take a ball. When it's wonderful, as y'all know, when it works, you go into a scene, you have 16 different ways to tell the truth. When you're stuck, sometimes you're just trying to protect from telling a lie. Not near as fun. Sometimes you're just like, man, I'm not feeling it. I just feel like I've got to connect the dots, and that's all I really can do. I don't have the song. I don't feel myself in flight. Now, when it's worked, and what I try to find now is from the inside out, get the guy's monologue. And this is something that's kind of come to me and have really helped me in the last couple of years. Get the guy's monologue, then I can have the dialogue. Then I can do a scene if I got the monologue. If I know what's the Socratic dialogue of the man that I'm playing, then have the dialogue. And it's not about the words, obviously. And then I was able to just, when I do my job better, be more in that moment, not anticipate. But also when I said impasse earlier, catch. I love it when you catch somebody in a scene. I love entrances and exits. I love doing all the work about, let's backload about where the guy's coming from and why, how he got here, and where's he going. I love to finish scenes. Anytime there's the old ... Finish it out, write it out. Expound, just finish, right? And I write a lot on scripts, write way more than I ever actually say, but I have it. It loosens me up on the entrance and the exit. And I like it when I'm seeing actors, and I think I like my work best when I'm feeling like I'm being caught coming in and caught going out. And maybe if it's in the entire picture, if you feel like that 2 hours that you watched was not just a finite piece of the story. I like watching films and characters. I'm watching the film, and I love imagining what they were doing the 5 years before and where they're going after that, the 5 years after. There's always a prequel and a sequel and a follow-up, even if there's not in films. I like to at least have that understanding and feel, I let my imagination go, that I got a real good idea what this guy was doing the last 5 years and what they'll be doing for the next 50. You know, I mean, I've been, the last 2 years, I've really been able to, if I can, and this doesn't always happen, tap into a character's obsessions and then just get really feverishly drunk on them, on those obsessions. Because I'm always looking for something to take literally. And I've called them like a launch pad lines. Sometimes you catch it in the screen direction. Sometimes it's written in a character. A couple, David Wooderson, Days Confused. Rick Linklater writes a line that says, "That's what I love about those high school girls. I get older, but they stay the same age." Well, that's a line that you're like, well, who is this? Now, that guy's got a history. And what if that's not an attitude, if that's really his constitution? Now the imagination goes wild and just, you've got, you know, Dallas and Magic Mike, it was a launch pad character. I mean, there was stuff that was in there that was written in that script, and I was like, oh, well, the Barnum and Bailey was just easy. I just wrote, and it was so fun to go improvise. The Mark Hanna character in Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, Terrence Winter wrote a line. I'm sitting there showing the Jordan Belfort character the ropes at a lunch, and it says, you know, the secret to this is hookers and cocaine. And by the way, how many times a week you jack off? I mean, you're going, oh, well, there's no ceiling on this guy's vernacular. So be a rapper, be a poet, go, you know. Now, obviously, if you're playing a lawyer or you're playing a scientist, someone whose occupational vernacular has to be precise and to the moment, it's not as easy to just riff and rap. But I always try to find something that the character says that I go, I think, what if they take that literally? And, you know, when you read something that you go, that's a real personal politic of that character, it blankets an entire performance. And it also gives me something, I think, something to fly with that I can always have in my pocket if I get in trouble in a scene. I can go, well, I know that this man is about this. I know he needs this throughout, before this story ever started and after this story goes away. I know he needs this. So if I follow that, at least, I know I can't go wrong. What else are some things that I remember writing this down to myself: don't act like one, be one. And that's always a pretty good one, pretty simple one. You know,
it's sometimes easier than others. I remember you were originally going to be a lawyer, and you've played a lot of lawyers.
Yeah.
And your breakout role in Time to Kill was a lawyer. And in a way, that part was really hard. I mean, it seemed to me extraordinary that you were this person who'd never held a film together before, and you were playing with these extraordinarily technically competent Sam Jackson and Kevin Spacey and Sandra Bullock. And, you know, I couldn't figure out how you had the nerve to take over the screen when they were on it. Just take your time and take the space.
Right.
And that was extraordinary.
Well, I had a couple of, for one thing, that was my first role where I was the lead. It was, you know, I was aware, people were talking about this is a major, big budget studio film, this is on your shoulders. But I remember Joel Schumacher, the director at that time, and he said this too, it was a great thing to say to a young actor. He very early on, when I would go to talk about character work and stuff, he'd go, no, hey, you're Jake. He remembers it from the week before, he's like, no, stop, you're Jake. You are Jake. And so I still, you know, went off and had my musings about where I was the character, where he was me, but he just kept going, no, you're Jake. It's that simple. That was his direction almost the entire time. It was a great thing to tell me at that time. It took pressure off. And I think the other thing was, you know, when you work with people that are good, we always find out that we think there's going to be they have a magic trick, but they really don't have a magic trick. The people that are good at what they do, they just usually do the simple stuff really good, and they're easier to work with. You know, I've found that. I mean, when I can give you a long list of people that's that way, they seem to be easier to work with. So, those are two things that I know are true about that experience.
Well, right now you've been on a real roll where directors want you for very specific parts that are character parts now. Magic Mike is a character part. The little part in the Scorsese movie, which just scared me to death and made me put all my money back in the bank for no interest at all because I'd never go near one of those guys. It really scared me. And Dallas Buyers Club especially, I mean, it's tremendous character work. I think maybe we should take a look at a clip from Dallas Buyers Club. So let's see if these guys can load this clip up and take it now.
Just want to
What?
ice cold beer, bull ride again. Well, take my woman dancing, you know. I want kids. I mean, I got one life, right? Mine. But fuck, I want somebody else's sometimes. Sometimes I just feel like I'm fighting for life. I just ain't got time to live. I want it to mean something.
It does.
Can you tell us what made you want to play this part?
Yeah. It came across my desk about 6 years ago. I immediately wanted to do it. I didn't know about Ron Woodruff. I didn't know about Buyers Clubs. And I remember thinking that one, I was like, boy, this is an incredible story about this man's life that I knew nothing about. And I remember saying, boy, even if this was fiction, this would be worth telling. And then the fact that it was not fiction, that it was based on his life and true events, made it more important and gave me a lot more incentive to have to do it. I loved the original sort of anarchic way that it dealt with a very dramatic and heartfelt subject, HIV, and not only in '86, but with this guy's life and a lot of others. One, he was heterosexual. I thought that was interesting from a heterosexual's point of view. Two, he was a son of a bitch the whole way through. He was a self-serving, self-preserving businessman, hustling son of a bitch. And I thought, and I was real happy that it never got sentimental. And I felt like, boy, what a challenge this could be to pull off the truth and the heart, but also the blasphemous humor, because it was a real guy on the page. So I thought that was an original way to deal with this subject matter. And I remember early on saying, you know what, if this had been a larger budget film, if this had been a Hollywood studio film, they would have rewrote Act 3, and Ron Woodruff would have, at the Act 3 turn, 2 to 3, would have had to come and tell everyone, I'm sorry for my bigoted, homophobic ways. What have I become? I'm sorry. The bow would have come out, and the version of the bourgeois blues would have started to play. Now, for this guy's life, because he was not that guy. He just was not that guy. And I remember saying, you know what, if we keep him the son of a bitch, the humanity will reveal itself. If you keep him the businessman, the crusader will reveal itself. And we didn't know. I mean, there were many times, not during shooting, because not many people talked to me, and I didn't talk to too many people then, but there were many times I heard, and I'm sure it's why it was passed on for 20 years, but this guy's not sympathetic. And I remember, I'm glad I felt this way, but my immediate response was, that's not my job to make him sympathetic. Empathetic. If he's a real guy, you can understand that, hey, that's a real guy. He's not playing an attitude. That's who he is. And if you don't like who he is and his politics when you first meet him, you go like, I know people like that. You go, man, they don't even know better. You know, there was ignorance at that time, and there's a lot of people still that way. So I just saw him as a real human, And I remember saying, you know what, McConaughey, just hang your hat on the humanity of this guy, not the morality, but the reality and the humanity of this guy, and stick to it, and trust that humanity will come out. And so, you know, I don't have the best relationship with sentimentality, and sometimes I like it, and it's got its place, but other times I think it's force-fed a little bit for my taste. So it was a way to deal with a really dramatic and heartfelt subject matter with a really original anarchic guy. And, you know, we knew this thing. You know, you look at the poster, you hear the one-liner, you know you got something that's of import, something that it's probably going to be good medicine for you to go see. But what you don't know, what I think we did pull off, which was sort of a coup, is that how entertaining it is. And in my experience of watching it with people, the first act, because people know the subject matter, they're a little afraid to laugh, because you're like, I can't laugh in this movie right now, and then people start to lose something. You go, I can laugh, and it's a really good example of how humor reveals such humanity. About humor shows such sincerity, and almost. I mean, there's so many scenes in this that could have been heavily dramatic, and could have been just as true. I mean, Ron, you know, comes home after the dinner with Eve Sachs. How many people have seen it? He comes home from the dinner with Eve Sachs, and he comes home and he masturbates, and that could have been tears rolling down face. I can't have sex with anyone. But yet, he's looking at pictures of hot rod women, and then he sees the Mark Bolan picture, and he's like, God damn it. You know, the scene where he says, who's the lady in the clinic? She has AIDS, and then they go to the bathroom and hook up. That was a very touchy scene. That came up because when we were listening to tapes, and I was listening to tapes of Ron Woodruff, there was always a woman in the background. And the way he talked to her, you could tell they were hooking up. And I went to John Mark. I was like, look, when he had HIV, but he was still having sex. And we were like, oh, I don't know how to put that in the movie. That's like really touchy. Two people with HIV, I don't know how we do that. Well, one day we show up to work, and John Mark goes, this girl's going to walk in there, call a secretary over and ask who it is, and then I think y'all go back in the bathroom. And so we shot it. Well, if you look at the scene, it's not icky at all. It's almost, one, it's a little bit life-affirming. It's sad, but he cuts outside to the staff listening to the sounds, and it's one of the funniest scenes in the movie. So again, the director did a lot of things with how he dealt with scenes that could have been very heavy-handed, but yet the humor showed the humanity in them, and that was a lot of Jean Marc.
Okay, why don't we take a look at another clip from Dallas Buyers Club, actually something you were talking about.
Hey, TJ, this is Rayon. Rayon TJ.
Hey.
I said hi to you. Shake his hand. Come on, buddy, what's your problem?
Fuck you. Hey! Oh! Okay.
Shake his hand, DJ. Shake his hand, DJ.
Give him a good one. Give him a good one.
Now, why don't you fuck off?
Come on back to your miserable life. What?
Yeah, I think we have to open it up to these guys out here.
Sure. I mean, if the role's right for it, I don't think I'd want to. I've said this before. I've said this before. This is my responsibility as an actor to do that. This was not an eccentric, affected choice of I think it'd be cool if I did. It was something I needed to do, and yeah, the right role, it was definitely part of the wonderful adventure that I had. I mean, this being somewhat biographical, I had so much to digest. I mean, I had 16 hours of tapes, transcripts. I had his family opening their scrapbooks to me. I had his diary. I had so much, plenty to do. Those things that us actors go, wow, look at all this. And I'm going to dive into this, and I'm going to have so much fun creating backstories, things that I was getting from his diary. And then you start reading between the lines. I mean, I remember I could hear what he said on his tapes. And after the first couple times, I listened to what he was literally saying, and then I had to remember this was a guy talking to a guy who's going to write his story. Now, so he was already soliciting, whether he knew it or not. And he was a salesman, but you go, okay, what are the things in between? And I remember hearing certain speech patterns sneak up, where he'd sound like this guy's 7th grade education who became this expert. And he would speak like a medical scientist and expert, and then slip off in the same sentence into a conspiracy theory, come back, tell a joke, and then forget what the fuck he was talking about, and the dementia was coming in. And so it was all right angles. This was not merge and easy. There were rough corners with this guy. All of them were rough. His diary, I've said this before, gave me the monologue. That was my secret. I had that in my hip pocket. And that, there was a lot to read between the lines. I mean, everything from what his dreams and aspirations were, wandering, trying to just maybe get out of there, figure out what he could do with his life. And that would fade out every week till the Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The longhand would get a little more. You could tell when he was high, up late at night, scribbling, doodling, talked about people he hooked up with, and a guy living in a small town trying to get out, and this was before he had HIV. So I had all of that. There were certain places I went where, imagination served. I would try to give 4 or 5 versions of each scene because I knew we weren't going to have time on the day to talk about them. I knew we weren't going to have time to say, well, hey, what if we tried this? Just went in and tried to go in as loaded as possible. And have enough to where I felt like I could go keep running the camera. Don't even cut. Look, the coming home. I mean, I didn't come home. I don't think I'm an actor who. I don't know that word method. It's kind of misused. It's got so many definitions. People throw it around in an odd way. I mean, when I was so seeing this guy from the inside out that I was never objective or never voyeur on what was happening. But at the same time, I know I was talking to Jean-Marc about the scenes continually. Now, I was talking to him in my understanding of the scene, but I was talking to him as Ron Woodruff would talk to him. Now, that, number one, was relaxing because Ron gets to the point real quick. He doesn't mince words. And so our communication was hardcore, and it had nothing to do with, one of manners and graces. Which at least made our communication clear. But coming home, I don't know. Well, with kids, that's sort of a free, wonderful kick in the heart. It just reminds you, hey, you're playing make-believe, so make them believe. And you're coming home, and I'm a big logic guy, and kids quickly remind you, logic doesn't have anything to do with this. There's not a period on the end of any of these stories. You said the end? No, I said the cheetah grew wings and flew over the purple sea and landed on top of the elephant. And if you say you can't do that, well, I'm saying the cheetah ran west and ran around the world until he came up on the other side with the elephant. You're like, that could happen. So there's a certain relaxation to that, and for me, it's a nice reset at the end of the day. I mean, I know I definitely change somewhat in my own character with each role I'm playing in my own life, but I don't come. It's nice to have. I like having that one checkout at the end of the day. I don't like in the middle of the day, an hour between setups, go back to the trailer. I do not like that. I don't like going back and introducing myself to the real world, hearing a phone ring, hey, can you make this phone call in between? I don't like that on the day. I like go to work in the morning, 12 hours later, let someone tell you, okay, it's a wrap, and then kind of have a glass of wine and fade out and head back home and see the family. But yeah.
Okay, let's have a mic down here. 2 people actually right next, 3 people next to each other, so just pass it down.
Matthew, I just wanted to acknowledge to you that this is the most authentic portrait of a person with AIDS that I've seen in the film. I know that world really well. I know PWAs that I love that were assholes. I know PWAs that were straight, that were assholes, but I love them because of their humanity. So I want to congratulate you and the script. I mean, I thought the integrity of the script was just wonderful. My question has to do with working with Lee Daniels and working with John Pierre. The kind of courage that you brought to each of those characters in The Paperboy and in this film, where do you go to go, I'm going to push myself there in a very dangerous zone for someone who may not be like the character?
Well, when I said get drunk on their obsessions earlier, look, I think one of the things, you know, like there's a scene in Lee Daniels' Paperboy where Ward gets beat. You come in and see him bloody and beat with the 2 black guys. Well, you know, Ward was a guy who was all about secrets, right? So I figured he was really into those S&M clubs down in Miami, and that's a place he went because he could get away with it and not be exposed. And so this night in that film, he goes back down that dark road. And I remember the idea was Lee was like, okay, so I think you'd be, you know, laying there you know, you're probably handcuffed in front, and you're laying there bloody. And I was like, no, hands are handcuffed to the ankles, and it's been bent over like he's took it the worst way, and it was ugly. And he think about this guy, he liked it. He needed that pain. He needed that pain. And I remember Lee going, you are not. And I said, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And then we were like, so, you know, that was in context with who the guy was. I'm not ever trying to push something for eccentricity's sake. I've done that before, and I've seen it done before. And you're like, well, that was eccentricity for eccentricity's sake. To what? Get shock value? Now, mind you, I know that character in that role, and me even playing that character in that role, had something to do with the shock value of the whole story and the fact that it was me playing it. There's for some people, a certain shock value. But, I mean, it didn't feel like something that I was like, this is a really courageous thing. It seemed like that's the truth of what the guy would do. And if when I'm there on the set working, I'm not thinking about my outside world perceptions of me, Matthew McConaughey. That's one of the fun, great things about this travel we get to do when we go act. You get to go there and be in that bubble and say, just be true to your man here. Tell the truth on this guy. And and so I just, you know, I don't know. I mean, I've always like, if I can in context find what certain characters are obsessed with and what their monologue or secrets are, I enjoy pushing them further to the truth. Because I think the truth burns. Truth is ugly. It ain't easy. And so, you know, and that was a character, and then with this one, you know, shoot, this guy, if he wouldn't have been such a son of a bitch, he wouldn't have lived the 7 years. That same guy that you can't stand, it's the reason he stayed alive 7 more years. And rage, that's what this guy had so much of. And I've said this before, but it's true, man. No emotion. Rage gets more shit done than any other emotion. Like it or not, for good or for bad, rage gets more done, causes more movement. And that's what this guy had. That's what kept him alive, because he was so damn mad. You know? Yeah.
When there was a scene in the movie when Ron was crying in the car.
Yeah.
And I saw sadness in that cry, but I also saw like hope or happiness. I'm not sure, like an uplifting emotion. And was there an uplifting emotion in that cry? And if there was, like, how do you manage all those emotions at once?
Yeah. Look, for me, with most emotional scenes like that, like I'll personally cry at birth much quicker than I'll cry at death. I just personally will. If I think of something, the guy that was wrongly accused that got out of prison, I'm weeping. You know, he got out. My kid's birth, things like that. That's where I lose it. That scene, though, for me was, I didn't see anything in that to see as hopeful. That's Ron at his peak of isolation. He's just gone through, just been told he has it completely. What are you talking about? You're speaking another language. HIV, what the fuck did you say? Takes the guy as a challenge to the doctor, which was great. That guy that would do that, I remember thinking, that's how that guy would react. He wants to fight the guy that said, those are fighting words. You know? The doctor saying you got HIV. And then denial, and then he figures it out on his own. And so that was, for me, that was just that drive was Ron's trip, and all of a sudden it hits him. That's when it first hits him, that his mortality is for real. He's been given 30 days. And what the fuck am I going to do? He looks at the gun. You know, he's got enough rage to not pick that thing up. But he's had it was a dead, it's where the reality set in for the first time in that scene. So I didn't personally have anything in my mind or play anything that felt hopeful in that scene. Yeah.
No, you spoke about finding your characters within yourself or within the truth of who the character
Yeah.
is. But do you ever find the need to go and speak to other people to find the source? I mean, you said
Sure.
this is biography. And can you talk about what you look for in the people you interact with,
Sure.
whether it's a lawyer or whether it's an HIV
Sure.
positive?
I've done a couple of biographical pieces. So like I said, when I went and talked to Ron's family, sister and daughter, and when I heard those tapes and I knew here's a guy selling his Buyers Club to a guy who's going to make a movie, you got to go, where's he telling the truth? And where do I need to read between the lines about who he really was? Because I'm playing him, it's live. He's just coming into this. He doesn't have the Buyers Club yet in this film. Secondly, I went to meet his family. You going to talk about somebody in your family that's no longer here? It's real easy to give somebody the greatest hits version of who that person was at his best. The things they say at the funeral. His family was so honest about who he was and who he was not. You know, I mean, he stole my cars twice. Never got him back. One of them they just found in New Jersey. And they go, oh, he was a son of it. And they'd always say, but you couldn't help but love him. And then, you know, I've done others where I really tried to, for instance, I really tried to study the person and emulate them. I've also done them like in Bernie where I didn't want to. My imagination seemed so clear with who the guy was, and Rick Linklater, the director, knew him. So I said, I need to go through, you're my meter, because I'm not going to go, I'm choosing not to go study this guy. Because where my imagination is with what you've written on the page, I just don't feel like I want or need anymore. So I said, you tell me if I'm going too much or not enough. And, you know, Rick and I work where he always takes me right up to, if it's comedy, usually he'll take me right up to, well, before we get to caricature, you know. But he's got he and I have a real similar sensibility about that. So I trusted Rick on that. Look, there are other people. There are, you know, people that I've talked about that I have, and I'm not going to say their names because I haven't made the movies, but their stories are still out there to be made. And what you hear how them talk about themselves on Friday night is great. Talk to them Sunday night. I never spoke like that. No, I would never use those words. I never did those things. And you're like, oh, okay, Sunday came. We went to church. You know, thinking about postmortem. I need, you know, how am I going to look? What shadow am I leaving? Talk to them next Thursday night. I was wilder than that. So I did this, and then so you have to read between the lines. And usually, I think the Friday night version is more true, who they are. So gotta listen to things. I try to listen to things like that. And that's what I mean when I say read between the lines a little bit. And a lot of times, it's what they're saying when they're not talking, or when you catch them when they don't feel like they don't feel like it's a proverbial Sunday night, and they need to give the best version of themselves.
Okay. So saw someone, yeah. Two people way in the back. If we can get mics in the middle, actually, there are three people, and I think that's going to have to be it. Way back in the back row.
Okay. Can I ask?
You could probably yell. I bet we can hear you. If you don't, you can't get the mic.
Hey. Hello? Is here?
Yes, here, yes.
Yes. So I want to ask you something, and is in the beginning of your career, how do you deal with, for example, economical struggles or with validating yourself, especially in this film industry, like validating yourself as you were going to make it, you know, like no matter what, especially like I'm talking about like 20 years ago, like validating yourself as you were going to make it. Like how did you deal with all of those struggles that make some people never make it, even if they're super talented, but others like you, that you make it. And when I say you make it, not because of this big recognition, but because you're able to do what you do and what you like to do.
Well, let me tell you what happened for me, and everyone's got a different script about how it worked out for them. I did Days Confused between my junior and senior year of college. I finished that for the first time. I was like able, a week into that was when I first said, man, I love this. I'm getting paid $320 a day. People are patting me on the back at the end of the day saying, you're good at this. That's the first time I ever thought about it as a possible career. I knew I wanted to be in the storytelling business, but I wasn't even allowing myself to dream about being an actor. I go back to school, graduate, and drove out west, and I had what I thought was a production assistant job. Now I show up out there with a few $1,000s in my pocket, and that production assistant job got pushed. The movie got pushed, so I didn't have that job. But the first audition I went on was for a guy named Hank McCann for a film called Boys on the Side. So while after that audition, the next one, Angels in the Outfield, this is places where I got very fortunate, lucky, however you want to call it. Angels in the Outfield was a Disney baseball film. They wanted to see me, the All-American guy named Ben Williams who plays outfield. I put on my All-American cap, went to go see this guy on the Warner Brothers lot. I remember I walked in, it was the afternoon. I was backlit by the sun on the Warner Brothers lot, and the guy was sitting on the couch. And I walked in, and he goes, hey, look at you, the All-American kid. I was like, yes, sir. He goes, you ever played baseball? I said, 12 years. He goes, you got the job. All of a sudden, I'm in Oakland playing baseball for 11 weeks for Schedule F, 48-5. I mean, we threw a big party, and I paid. And then that Hank McCann thing, I got called back to read for Herbert Ross and got that part in Boys on the Side. So the first auditions I had out there, I actually got. There are places I took some chances. I went and saw a little window of opportunity and hit it. And I remember learning very early, boy, if you got that little one, you better hit it, because if you stop to even think about it, boom, it closes. One of those was sitting with Joel Schumacher in a meeting for A Time to Kill. I was meeting him to play the role that Kiefer Sutherland played, the Klan member. And I had read the book, and I went in with this plan, talking about that character. And then I said, hey, who is so-and-so playing the role of Jake Brigance, the lead? And he goes, no, why? Who do you think should? And I was smoking cigarettes at the time, and I remember going, I think I should. And he laughed, and he goes, great, it's a great idea, but it's never going to happen. Planted some little seed. He called me 3 weeks later and said, I want to give you an audition. It's on Mother's Day. We're going to do it way on the other side of the town, because even if you do good, you're not going to get the part. And I don't want it to be a demerit on you that you screen tested and you failed. I went, and all of a sudden, 3 weeks later, I get the call from the Grisham and Schumacher and said, you want to play Jake Brigance? And I was actually shooting Lone Star and Pedro Snegers with John Sayles at the time. So, I know I deal with it. I mean, I got very fortunate in how I got started, number one. Tell you what I've learned now, process. If you're getting in this business because you want certain results, go do something else. Because if you can't enjoy that process, the actual work, the getting to to create and share something that maybe only you can do it that way in some original, then go do something else. I mean, and yeah, if you can't, if you're in it for the result, thinking because I want it, and I was never thinking. Again, I was just learning about film. I didn't even watch films growing up. I didn't have an idea in my head about, oh, I want to be a famous actor. I didn't have an idea in my head of that. I don't even know if I knew enough to even know how to think about that. But I wasn't thinking about it. And I got very fortunate with getting the first roles that I went up for. But it was, if you enjoy the process of the work, I've found that if that's enough, actually the results have a better chance of coming. Yeah.
If we can get a mic in the middle, a woman in a white blouse, button down the middle, who's been waving her hand forever. Yeah, with dark hair. Yes, you just turned around.
I was wondering how your approach to a TV character is maybe different than a movie character, and such an intense character. I don't know if you know how long that show lasts and how that changes.
True
things.
Detective?
Yes.
Yeah. It's pretty good, isn't it? I'm watching it same way all of you are watching it. They sent me all the screeners before, and I started to watch them. I said, no, I want to do this how everyone else does it. So I've only seen week 5, and then I've gone back, and I'm going back and checking them out a couple of times the week after. So I'm with all of y'all on this thing. And I made it, and I read the script, and I'm not even sure where this thing's going. But I got a feeling I'm going to read that quote somewhere tomorrow. Here's what that was. It was a finite piece of work. It was 8 episodes. All right, so it was basically, I looked at it as a 450-page script. We shot for 6 months. The big challenge that I had was that I saw was, boy, you're going to have to be really patient. Because if we have a 450-page script, and most film scripts are 120, most film scripts, the Act 1 turn, Act 2 is at page 32. And this is like page 150. So the 1995 Cole, where I made some choices to keep him sort of that stoic guy that he is, I had a couple times where I was like, is this going to be really boring? Because, man, I've been doing the same laconic thing for now 5 weeks. And I was like, boy, and I started to feel like maybe certain scenes, I was like, maybe I need to spice it up. And I was like, no, wait, Crash is coming. Wait, 2012 Cole and the interrogations is coming. If you hold your line here, McConaughey, the dynamic will show because the characters are so different 17 years later, or when Cole becomes Crash. So a lot of it for me was patience and just and really mapping that thing out and having a graph and understanding exactly where I was and understanding the basic 3 stages of Cole, the 95, 2002, and the 2012. And then really defining those for myself. And then after a while, I kind of felt comfortable about where to go and my gait change, speech patterns, everything else. But the main thing was being patient, because I tell you, after 5 weeks, I was like, is this guy going to be really boring? The 95 Cole. New 2012 Cole was wild. He was a guy who's, he's fallen prey to his own beliefs at that time, and then you knew Crash was going to be fun and wild because he's in deep doing whatever it takes, almost on a death wish. But the 95 Cole was something that I really had to have patience with, because there was just so much more of it. And in a film, it would have been the first 15 pages, 20 pages. Yeah.
Red sweater and black hat.
Speaking about process, when did you realize you were in this business, not for the results, but for enjoying that process and being it for the right reason, and which has been the most enjoyable process for you?
I mean, the actual making of a film, the day-to-day going to work, the construction of a film, has always been my favorite thing. I like making a film much more than I like watching them. I do. And even the ones I'm in. I really love the coming together with a whole bunch of people, having an idea on paper, and everyone's an expert at what they do, and you're off on this journey. You got ideas, but then you just let it go and see what it can become. I love the making. That's when I'm happiest, is when I'm making. of film or telling a story, the day to day, and more so than watching them, really. Look, I kind of defined that for myself about 4 years ago. Stay in process, head down in process, stay in your bubble, and when it's over, be that fulfillment. Notice when I started noticing that fulfillment of it, I just finished. Well, that's enough. That's it. I don't know if it's even coming out. I don't know what it's going to turn in. Man, I hope we got it, and I hope the director put something good together. But I don't know. Nothing I can do about that. All I know is this experience that I say, go have the experience, McConaughey. And if I can love this experience, and at the end of it, I'm like, may never even hear that film again. May never even know that story again. It may be gone. May find out that all the negatives got fried in the x-ray machine. There is no film. But that's okay. I had an experience there. When I got selfish for that experience, when I got that process, enjoying that process, the day-to-day architecture of making a movie and creating a role, that's when I've been the happiest. And more results have come that way in an odd way. Yes. But I just saw when I started really approaching them as this is a finite thing and this is just that experience. Other than that, I'm not producing this thing. I'm not the one editing it. I don't know what it's going to be. That's it. And then all of a sudden they come out and you go, oh, I think we got a good one. Or, oh, that's what it is. And I've been real happy with a lot of the films that I've been able to do. And, a lot of these films that I've been doing were independent films. So you don't have any guarantee they're going to have a wide release. You're not going to have any studio's money behind them. They're usually character-driven films that can be somewhat more experimental. They're indies because no studios wanted to really make them because they didn't see an all-access advantage for them. They didn't know how to sell them. And all of them emerged in their own way. Mud. I don't know if y'all seen Mud. I love that movie. They knew how to sell Magic Mike. Warner Brothers picked that up pretty quick. But a lot of these, you don't know what it's going to be, and they have to be word of mouth. They come out in a few theaters, and they keep chugging along. Bernie kept chugging along. Mud kept chugging along. So yeah, they're choosing the experience and saying this has got to be what's got to be really filling me up. Yeah, I'm vain enough for other things to fill me up too, but this has got to be what's really in my gut. It's really filling me up. If it's not, I'm looking at it the wrong way.
Well, thank you so much. We've had a great experience.
Thank y'all.